Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford. You might be wondering, where are they? Why do they look so cool? Why are their shirts so incredibly interesting? And that's because this week is the Black Leadership Summit 2025, something that we started about 3 years ago. And so today we have the luxury of having two incredible guests join us on the podcast today. Mr. Adrian Crawford, do you want to give them a little bit of an introduction?
I absolutely will, yes. Black Leadership Summit was something that was started by me and a good friend of mine, Dr. Chris Johnson. And really what it was to be able to give, we realized Black leaders trying to build multi-ethnic spaces, being able to give them space to grow, to learn, to be equipped. And so it's an incredible event. We kind of just started and it's really just taken off. And so today we've got two very, very important guests and people who I think are some of the up-and-coming leaders in our generation. We have Tyler Burns, and Tyler is the pastor of Rise City Church in Pensacola. He is also the host of one of the top podcasts that's out there on a platform called The Witness. It's called Pass the Mic. And again, Tyler is one of those dynamic communicators and leaders, I think, really in our country. Next, we have Bri, who actually has been someone who I've been friends with, been a mentor for him for 15 years. And I'm talking about one of the most multi-creative people I've ever met. I mean, he's a singer, composer, a phenomenal dancer. Also, he is, he has artists, and when it comes to social media, all those things, branding, marketing. He's a professor at Columbia University. I mean, again, does it all. And today's conversation really is this idea of what does leadership really look like in this generation? What does burnout look like? And then we also, again, which is a good thing, we talk a lot here about how faith is very centered to what we do. So we actually do a deeper dive today to where more than our normal podcast, we talk on this issue of faith and the Bible and how that really impacts leadership, because I think it's really important, because I think so many times that's the only way I see the world. And a lot of times I just talk very plainly to people, but I love today the conversation, how it's something that's really at the essence of who we are. We were able to really bring that forth. And so I hope you like today's podcast. It's going to be an incredible one. So check out this podcast today with Dubois and Tyler. Well, guys, we're excited today, as we talked about, got two incredible guests, and we're going to jump right in today, and we're going to talk this idea of like leadership, burnout, this whole world. So I want to first start off really this conversation, and Tyler, I want to start with you. What is your thoughts in general? It's about burnout when you hear that in today's world, again, among the generations, whether if it's older, younger. What's your thoughts about it?
Especially for our younger generation of either leaders or ministers, whatever it may be, I start to wonder, maybe you can speak into this, if burnout is a result of overwork or is it a result of our own fragility? Like, what do we mean when we say burnout, right? Are we talking about I'm stretched too thin, there's too much weight on me, or I just haven't properly established my boundaries, I think. And so I've had to confront this whole idea of, when we think about burnout, is it actually something that is real or imagined? And then how do we actually identify it and properly define it so that we know how to, point it out before it gets to that place?
Dubois, what about you, sir?
Yeah. Similarly, I think that because of a hyper exposure to kind of therapeutic language, counseling, all of the incredible books, right, that we're all gleaning from. Beautiful. Siri had an opinion about that too. But I think because of all those things, like, we become hyper conscious of certain language frameworks or certain ideas that we subscribe to. And then there's all the memes of like, I'm so exhausted and all my life is so tiring and adulting is rough. And so because that's a part of the like cultural zeitgeist, sometimes it filters into our system in ways that we haven't been intentional about examining. And so I agree. I'm like, are you actually burned out? Are you stressed out? Are you stressed out, or are you just needing like a day of rest? Or do you need a day of rest, or are you just doing stuff that doesn't matter, so you're exhausted? Yeah.
Or are you overstimulated because of all the distractions and noise that you've allowed to filter into your life while you work? Yeah. Right. And holding both of those is impossible for the human mind and heart.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I think about when I think about burnout, I've been telling people, I feel like burnout is really a lot of times, I don't really think it's about the work, because I don't know. I mean, I've never heard a blue collar worker saying they got burnout. Like somebody laying concrete, construction work, they like, I'm burnt out. Like, no, it's what you do, right? I think I think burnout is a lot of times it's an emotional state of like, I think a lot of it really stems from this idea of codependency, because I think you don't know where you end and the next person begins. So what happens, I realized when I actually went through it myself, it was the idea of like, I was taking on all of these emotional things that were not mine to take on. You know what I mean? Because when you lead, you're always taking things on. And, we've been taught, man, that at the end of the day, everything rises and falls on leadership, which is true. It does. But what I took that as is that, if something's wrong, then it's my responsibility to fix it. So I need to know every bit of information, and then the worry and what that does, that starts to just wear at you versus knowing like, man, I can speak truth. I do this, but I know I end here. Somebody makes a decision. They make that decision, and that's their decision, not me trying to do that. Because over years as a leader, you always you want to do your best to help people. But what you find is that, man, I've learned people are going to do what they want to do. And at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not a bad leader for saying, no, it's okay. Like, you're going to do that. I'm not going to like lose sleep because you make a dumb decision. Like, that's your choice to make that. Now, it may hurt my heart, but I'm not going to lose sleep, because all of a sudden it becomes this thing where I feel like it was performative, that as a leader, I have to be broken up all the time. And what that did was just emotionally, it like wore me down and it just rewired me. You know what I mean?
Would you guys mind breaking down, I guess, maybe your opinion on how it shows up in different generations? Because even when you talk about not hearing a blue collar worker talk about experiencing burnout, it's like, well, is that because of the type of work or the rhythm of work, or is it because we don't necessarily see a lot of Gen Z blue collar workers? Like, where do we think the language really came from, and how does it apply to different generations?
She was looking at you and she asked it. No, but I do think that each generation hears a different message from culture, kingdom, from their parents. They hear different messages. And I think for those of us who are millennials, it was really all about purpose and meaning. Like, why am I here? Like, what do I exist for? Like, what's my reason for being? What's my reason for taking up space in the earth? And so I think there was a lot of, for us, burnout that came from validating that reason, validating and justifying the fact that I'm here. So we didn't work from identity, we worked for it. And so as a result of that, we started to strive and take on so many different things, and also try to excel in everything that we do. And I think compounding with the amount of trauma in society and the unprecedented times that we live in, I think that leads to a heightened sense of emotional dysregulation. So I think it's more an emotional dysregulation than a physical actual weight on our shoulders, more a physical activity, because oftentimes that physical activity we can adjust to, but we haven't been trained on how to regulate our own emotions. And fighting for meaning, fighting for your identity, and being unable to regulate your emotions leads to a state of chaos and confusion.
Yeah, I mean, we're the children as millennials, right? I can only speak for my generation. Maybe speak for the generation before me because of my mom and older cousins and stuff. But we're the children of, especially if you grew up in like church culture and kingdom culture. Kingdom, it's complicated, but if you grew up in church culture, we're the children of the purpose-driven life generation. Like, our parents were the purpose-driven life parents. And so that ideology, that thought, which is a really powerful premise, right? But if with just the language and not a lot of application and not a lot of fruit being seen from that, then we become hyper striving in that direction. Like, okay, I need to be, doing everything on purpose, and I can only do what I'm purposed to do. Then I can't preoccupy myself with being a blue collar worker. I need to do what I'm really put on the earth to do. But sometimes I think that, at least in my own journey, some of my most restful seasons were seasons where I was doing jobs and work and on assignments that maybe didn't feel so purposeful. Maybe they didn't feel so philosophically stimulating. Maybe they didn't feel so creatively, thrilling, but I was restful because I was just like doing the thing that I had to do. I was going to Trader Joe's. I was working my shift. I was in grad school, and I was having a blast. I wasn't like, oh man, I'm so exhausted. I can't. But on the post side of that, you start pursuing purpose and you're doing all the things. And that's where, if ever I felt burnout, it's been seasons where maybe I was striving toward things that maybe it wasn't timing, or, I didn't have proper systems in place. So I think, yeah, all of those things that compounded can make you just like weary.
Yeah. And it also sounds like there's a level of burnout that comes from the pressure. Like, we made each of our purposes so much pressure to where it's like, it's almost, there's catastrophic consequences if we don't accomplish everything in our goal list, everything, if we don't serve every single person that comes through. Like, if as a pastor, I passed by somebody in the grocery store. I remember a couple of days ago, I passed by somebody who, through miscommunication, left our church. And it wasn't even anything big. It was just like, she just left our church. She was in there for a little bit, left. And I passed by her, and I remember this heightened sense of anxiety, right? Like, do I say hey? Are you going to say hey? Are you do I say hey? And then somebody, and it's like, why am I thinking about that as if that person was literally on my back, and God is going to be like, okay, so this person left. And because this person left now, you're a failure. And all those messages, as I'm in the Walmart, all those messages are firing off. And I'm like, man, I need to calm myself down. Like, I need to, let me go give her a hug. Like, let me, you know what I'm saying? Like, why do we make it seem like there's just catastrophic consequences for everything that we do, and that's no way to live, thrive, and flourish?
I think you said something really interesting, because I was thinking about what's some of my experience with being Gen Z. And I also grew up in a very Southern Pentecostal environment. I grew up a lot more like a boomer. But there's a lot of the Gen Z experience that I can relate to. And some of the core messaging is, you can do anything if you just believe. And in the church space, you can do anything if you just have faith. And there's almost this feeling of, so if I can do anything, a noble life means that I should do everything. And I feel like that brings this pressure. I don't feel like I ever learned what it means to have limitations until I started coming around here. It's one of the things that we're so thoughtful about. And one of the reasons why I thought about that too is because I feel like as I've kind of become a little bit more of a leader, and I've been around leaders, and you see the criticism, there's this expectation from Gen Z, from leaders, like they expect you to be everything. We expect you to be everything, which is ironic because it's the messaging that was almost taught to us, is that you can be anything, so you must be everything. And so you're not everything for me. I'm very frustrated, and I feel like you're not living up to even your morality or like your character.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hey, we're going to clip that one. I know. But no.
Come to Black Leadership Summit 2025.
But no, you're absolutely right. And it's like, we talk a lot about this. We talk about the idea of like human beings. Like, you have to come to a point where you know what your limits are. And I think one of the things, going back to our thing about burnout, was that, it was, a lot of people don't have too many doors open. I kind of compare it to like, it's, if you are trying to guard, if someone's trying to break into your home, the best thing to do is, if you can barricade it and there's only one or two entry points. What tends to happen, we have access points all over our lives. I tell people, even if you're only on 2 social media apps, right? That is multiple access points, because you go on there, then all of a sudden you go on one app, and then let's just say you pass in your profession, right? You are, you're an investment banker, or you're an entrepreneur, or whatever, and then you pass somebody who maybe whatever, and you see where, man, they just finished their Series A round of funding, and you're like, man, you're struggling to get that, and now all of a sudden you feel some type of way. Then you start going through their stuff, and then you start criticizing, then you start questioning your thing, then you may start thinking, I got to change our product. Excuse me, I got to change our product because, man, our product offering isn't good enough. And you go down that road. Then, let's just say you only have one social media. Then you get on podcasts. Now you jump on podcasts. Man, there's so many podcasts to talk about, and you just go down all these roads. And then you're there. And then, I say you in health. And now all of a sudden, man, you got your pre-workout, you got your post-workout, you got your post-workout, you go to bed workout, stuff. You're like, dog, I'm like, you are consumed with information. And what happens is that it becomes overwhelming because of going through what you're saying. We can do everything, and you can't. Like, you can't do everything. There is a limit. And so I've learned now in my life, what's kind of, even when I came out of burnout, was the fact of like, I had to even limit things to where I was like, I stopped myself one day. I'm like, what do I get for reading 3 books at once? Like, what do I get? Do I get a prize? Am I going?
Hey, yo, chill.
I know.
Man.
I'm saying,
chill,
like,
chill,
I mean, my
chill,
bad. Like, I'm like, like, do I get a prize? Or
You have
here's
to shoot at me.
yeah, I know. Or here's the other. Or like, I listen to this book at 1.5 speed, and I was just like, and that's fine. You want to get through information, whatever. But all of a sudden, I stopped. I'm like, okay, how much of this information genuinely am I retaining? How much of this information? Because when I started realizing I was doing all this stuff, and I was losing the ability to critically stop and to think about the context where I was. So I realized, man, the most way I've become, I think, where wisdom is accelerating my life, I've actually shut doors. Because I believe I'm at an age now to where I felt like it's not about what I'm learning out there. I've experienced so much life and so many different content. It's more what I felt was, what am I excavating from within to go bring to the world, because I've got real life experience from it, versus everything I'm now communicating comes from a book. I think when you're in your 20s, somebody in your 30s, yeah, it happens. But when you get to a certain point, you're like, if you don't have wisdom to actually be able to tell stuff, then that means you've not done the hard work of processing and working, because you should have, well, I'll tell you, when you get in your 40s, there should be, and again, I think you get in your 30s and things like, but there should be just wisdom that comes up because you've sat with your story, you sat with your experiences and do that. And I think so many times today, everyone is so crowded with information that we don't know, and then we can get into this later. But then, like you asked, when AI is coming into play, it's about to get insane, because now we don't think deep enough anyway. Now somebody else might think for us. So I think it's just going to continue to heighten. But I love what all of y'all said, like, man, the purpose-driven culture to the fact that we should be everything. I just think now with all this information, people are just going to be just kind of bombarded with it.
Yeah, when I was much younger, I heard a pastor say something. He said, we love worshiping at the altar of the God of options. And it's so easy for us to like worship how many things we do and worship all the things we could be doing, and to preoccupy our minds with that and obsess about that. And it is overwhelming and overstimulating. I'm just convicted off of the 1.5 speed, so I gotta change everything.
Don't
like,
do that.
That threw my whole life off, man. I was like, man, why am I even doing this, man? Why do I even have Audible? Sorry if Audible's a sponsor, my bad. Why do I even have Audible, man?
Hey, let me tell you this. That thing, I'm recovering, because sometimes I just go to bed, I lay down, like, my wife's like, are you listening to something at 1.2 speed going to sleep? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I used to be at 1.5. I'm like, this is a step down. I try to go this thing now. I try to go on 1 point speed. I feel like something happened to somebody. I'm like, man, are they okay? How slow they talk. I'm like, man, everybody good? Like, because I've been so used to listening. And then I hear in person, I'm like, man, what happened to him? Did, man, you know what I'm saying? He have a head injury or something? Because they talk, he's like, no, it's how he normally talk, crazy. So, I guess.
Can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
It's similar. I guess maybe it's a little bit devil's advocate.
Okay, here we go. Yep.
Is that I love to hear everybody's thoughts too. Is like, I think that the people alive right now also have the greatest opportunity to become the most resilient human beings. And I think because our experience every day, we have access, like you said, to so much information that experientially we have so many opportunities to practice what it's like to engage and then restrain, or listen to, let's say, a book on 1.5 speed. The moment you hear the one thing that you needed to hear, then you can exercise the restraint to tap out of it. It's like, I learned the one thing that I needed to learn. But I think it all ties back to purpose, because how do you know? How do you know that you're listening to the things that you need to listen to, or do the things that you need to do, especially in terms of limitations? How do you know what pressure is the right pressure and when you should truly lean into each thing seasonally?
I'm always like, where do these catchphrases and where do these phrases come from? So I think about like burnout. Like, what's the etymology of that? Like, where did we source that analogy from? And the immediate thing, and I don't know that this is true, but like, you know, like a fire burns out or like a candle burns out. Like, there's a certain capacity that a candle has, or there's a certain life span that a bonfire has, right? And so I think that also what contributes to burnout, if that happens for you, and it happens to all of us in different ways, and people experience burnout in different ways too. Burnout for you may look like falling into a depression after a hyper productivity or burnout for me may look like I don't have any more creative uses or whatever. Like it looks different for different people. But back to what I was originally saying in terms of like the origin of that thought process or that offering to society, I think what helps you avoid burnout is knowing your capacity. Knowing
It's really good.
my candle wick is this long, right? I know at about 6 o'clock, if I've been interacting with people all day around 6 o'clock, I need to recharge. I need to take a dinner break. I need to take a walk. I need to leave the room, right? And I'm trying to, as I'm getting older and older, I'm trying to really be a student of self. What do I need? What's my capacity? What are my limitations? What can I handle and what can't I handle? Because I also grew up in a culture where like you can deal with anything. Like by the grace of God, you can get through anything. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true. I don't know. And maybe that is true, like from like a cosmic space, but like my individual, I'm also built. The Creator God made me a certain way. He made me with a certain capacity, and so I think the more we understand that at any age, at any level, the more you understand what your capacity is, and how you're wired, the better you can avoid burnout because you'll know, oh, okay, I need to pause here right now in this season. I can listen at 1.5. Now I may need to bring it back to 1. It may ebb and flow in different seasons.
That's so good. I think akin to that, one of the most freeing things was seeing the example of David in 1 Samuel 17 when Saul tries to put his armor on David. And David specifically says, I can't use this because I'm not used to it. And I think there's some things in our life we have the freedom just to say no to. Say, this just doesn't fit me. This doesn't serve me. This doesn't work for this particular season of my life. This doesn't work for the particular life rhythm that I have, the health challenges and things that I'm facing right now. And I think the freedom just to say, this armor is not for me. I wear the armor that fits me, and I'll actually relinquish the need to try to prove that I could do something. Because, again, you talk about capacity. A major reason why we try to do too much is we want to prove we're capable. Like, you don't have to do that. That's not in your capacity. It's not in your wheelhouse. And that's been freeing for me to kind of let some things go. And I think I'm still scratching the surface of what that looks like. Because in this new season of life, I'm trying to figure out, well, now what can I take off? But I get more excitement about saying no to things in this season than saying yes to things. It's weird.
Why is that?
I think it's because the freedom to say no, I never felt like I had it. I had this really interesting relationship with God where I treated God more as boss than father. So I thought that God, every time I would talk to him, he would just tell me what I was supposed to do. And then I'd be like, okay, these are marching orders, so I go out and do them. But it wasn't like a dance of a relationship to say, I invite you into this, and then you choose and decide whether or not this fits your heart, your capacity, what you desire. Because just because you say no to this doesn't mean necessarily you're saying no to my plan and direction for your life. And as Southern Pentecostal, you never did that. You said yes to everything, and you just kept going, and you plowed, and you just not praying enough. And that's what I'm like, bruh.
It's always you're not praying.
Not enough faith, not enough grace of God. You're not reading enough. You're not your private time. And I'm saying, no, I actually get excited now saying, how do I streamline my life? My word for the year is simplify. So I'd actually simplify my life and close doors and see if more comes out of the doors that remain open.
No, it's really good. And I think you guys are all making incredible points because the ability, we live in this world where everyone thinks that we all, like I said, we can do anything, like you were saying earlier. So what we do, I don't think we have an actual healthy view of self and ability. Because I tell people all the time, listen, we're all, as a follower of Jesus, like, we're all equal at the foot of the cross. But talent is not. Talent is
Relax.
not. Let me tell you this.
Relax.
It was. I'm telling you, listen, man, this is where I knew talent was. I was tell a story. When I watched Michael Jordan in live and I played with him and we're on the court, I was looking at him, I'm like, oh no, I don't care how hard I work. I don't care how hard I pray. I don't care any of that. He's way better than me. And
I just gave him more.
He gave him more in that capacity of playing basketball. You watch it, I'm like, oh no, it don't matter what I do. I can't get there. And what it was, but I'd say it was one of the most humbling moments, but one of the most freeing moments, because it, like in the same breath, I was like, oh, because what I realized, like, because when I grew up, we wanted to be like Mike. In that moment, like, oh, I can't be like him. So it was crushing, but then it was liberating, because I'm like, but who can I be like? Who is my game like? So guys like, for basketball, Allen Houston, because I can shoot it, Reggie Miller, Jalen Rose, guys like that. So I'm like, oh, so I started patterning my game, and what happened? I even became better and more who I was, because I was like, oh, here is my skill set. Here is my ability. And I think that a lot of people today, we're not willing to say, okay, who are we? Do that deep work, and then from there, then deal with whatever it is that you have. Because I always say this, you will get, listen, you don't know how much of the world that you'll get, but you are responsible for what you do get. And most people do not steward the world they get, because they want more of it. When your talent and it is a thing why I love the Bible is because everyone talks about it being an archaic document. I'm like, listen, when you read it, understand, it is such real life. 1 talent, 2 talent, 5 talent. I'm like, listen, and everybody want to be 5 talents. I'm like, dude, this is not. Most people are 1 or 2 talents. And I heard this a long time ago. 1 and 2 talent people lead in layers. 5 talent people lead in leaps. And everybody wants to lead in leaps. Like Craig Rochelle. Craig Rochelle leads in leaps, right? All of a sudden, oh, he does some Bible app. I'm like, God, dog, oh. I'm like, dog, but start an app is like the greatest app of all time. What I'm saying? Then he goes here, he's like, oh, Craig Rochelle. And then, they go, man, we do 1 location, multi-site. 15,000 locations, multi-site. I'm like, all right, dog, whatever, right? But most leaders lead in layers. And what I love about that, because I used to always want to be the dude that lead in leaps. And some people would think of me that I led leaps. But I remember this. I was like, one time, I used to always ask, I always wanted this platform and whatever. And a good friend of mine looked at me one day. He's like, I don't think God never gave you that platform now, is because it would have killed you. He gave you the ability because he wanted you to be a father and a leader to generation. And here's what I'm realizing now. I desire the least that I ever have in my life to have any level of platform, and the level of influence that is happening to me is the influence I wanted in my 30s. In my 40s, I don't want it. And I think that's why God can give it, because I want to get it out of my hands. And so even as we're all here for this conference, what is the point of it? The point of this conference is for, as someone who's had the drive as being a Black leader, building multi-ethnic spaces, all this stuff, it is to say the ones who are coming behind me, we want to put it in their hands, information, wisdom, knowledge, and money to go rock out and do what they do. Because why? It's because that's what you're supposed to do. And I think if you do that, it allows you later in your life to, I think, end well. I think, and this is kind of going, I think a lot of people don't end well because they never practice now how to give it away. I'm just learning now. I'm just giving stuff away now. I'm going to constantly keep giving stuff, because like you get to the end of your life, it's like, oh, this is what I've been doing. But if you don't learn, it's like, you know how hard that is to be in your 70s and you've built a platform, millions of dollars, whatever, and you want to say, oh, well, I'm going to turn it over to somebody. You've never practiced it. So I'm like, I just look ahead, I'm like, nope, I'm going to practice that. And
so for each of you, what's a limitation that you wish you would have embraced sooner in your life that would have allowed you to flourish more in the current season that you're in?
Is there a therapist couch? Like we get like
a limitation that you wish you would have embraced sooner in your life to allow for the current season you're in to flourish or move a little smoother.
I would have limited my desire to want to change the world so fast, like to change it so fast, because what that always led me in, I never had my feet mentally, physically, or spiritually in the season, the place I was supposed to be. I always was living wanting to be somewhere else. And what that created in me was a consistent negative view of self, that I never saw myself as good enough, wise enough, talented enough. I always thought that God was, and it kind of came to this thing recently where I got this revelation where I used to always think God was holding out on me. I always thought like God had the little, it's kind of like the Geico commercial when he had the little bill.
Gotta be quicker.
Gotta be quicker than that. Oh, there you almost right. And he's like,
Wait, that's actually so
yeah.
good.
He's like,
it's a great analogy.
and he's like doing that. And I always thought God did that. And recently, I was with my friends. I was out in Montana. I'm looking in the mountains, and I was thinking about that. And I literally felt like, again, not an audible voice from then. God say, "Why do you think I was holding out on you?" And like in my head, I'm like, because it was. It's like every time I feel like we were getting close to this, it was just enough, but not, whatever. And he's like, but what if your perspective is off? What if actually what I was showing you, which I was showing you, I was giving you signs I was with you. Because here's the reason why. Because if I would have gave it to you, it would have killed you. I wanted you to know, even though you weren't there yet, you were going to be there. So I was giving you signs. So I saw it literally as like God holding out. He was actually giving me signs saying, no, I'm with you. It was because I always wanted to get somewhere. Whatever there was, and that's what I would do. I would have limited like my desire to do that, because here's the other thing, which goes to another point. It's like I just didn't have a scoreboard. What does it mean to win? I didn't know what it meant to win. And so that's what I've been working through and finally coming to that. Like, that's why I think a lot of people do burn out, get frustrated, angry. They don't know what it means to win, because there's always more money. There's always more influence. There's always whatever to make. But you have to figure out, which goes into what we talk about, purpose and things like that. So I would have limited my ability, my real desire to want to change the world so fast, because it just always kept me in such a negative place.
Yeah, I think I would have limited how much I talked. I think I said way too much. And it wasn't necessarily, it was this odd juxtaposition of my whole life was built around words and communication. And so I felt like I needed to say whatever I thought. And I started to realize slowly but surely I didn't have a life to back up what I was saying. And I think there's such a premature maturity that we are forced into as, and I'll speak specifically as young black men in church spaces and leadership spaces, where if you have a scintilla of gift, they're like, hey, let's just push you forward. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me lead in every area. And I didn't realize that I needed to limit how much I led. And I think during the pandemic specifically, I started to realize that I was leading in so many different spaces that I wasn't able to really master any particular space of leadership, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally. And more dangerously, I had talked myself into too much. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I wasn't able to lead myself. And I think it was interesting. We met at a season of life where I was trying to figure out how to lead me. And I'm leading a church and I'm leading organizations. And then I look up and I'm like, what about me? Because I'm leading everyone else. And I had talked myself into so much that I felt like that was what you were supposed to do. And I realized that I needed a much sharper, a much more rooted, settled life of silence and solitude. And I needed not to say as much in as many spaces so that when I did speak, my words would carry weight. And I think about even some of my favorite artists like, D'Angelo or whoever comes out with the album every 20 years, 15 years, whatever. And I think about how much restraint it takes. You were talking about restraint. How much restraint it takes to not put out the drafts of music that you're in the studio. Yeah. Just the restraint it takes to not share that hot take on the ID story. How much restraint it takes not to like drop that sermon illustration, and you're like, oh, it was wrecking me in private. You haven't even processed it. You don't even know what
that's
it means,
so true.
And it just it hits. It's like, yo, what does that mean? Like, is it edifying for anybody? And so I just talk so much that now I wish I could have some of those words back. And I want to model strategic silence better in this season of my life.
I just want to echo everything that you just said. No, 100%. The thing that was coming to me was I want to only share what's going to age well on this moment. I was like, Lord, I don't want to overshare. What comes to mind that feels appropriate to share, and why I'm so grateful for Black Leadership Summit and these spaces where we can hear our stories in what someone else is saying, so we don't even have to say it. That's so powerful to feel seen and heard, and you're just in the space. So that's why spaces like this matter. But the thing that I would have limited early on that I think would have just been bountifully a blessing now is access. I was far too exposed early on, and I allowed myself to share way more than I should have, and I allowed others to share way more of me than they should have.
That's a great point.
And I wish on a daily, I'm in therapy, in spiritual counseling, in coaching now, trying to heal those spaces that otherwise would have probably been protected and unwound, because there would have been no access there. But because I was overly exposed so early, and by my own, volition, like I wanted to share with the world and wanted to, be an example and be, a young Christian, and all the things that I represented, I wanted to share it all. and in retrospect, I'm like, what on earth was I doing? Can I just take it all back? Can I delete it? So yeah, access for me.
What's interesting about that, I was actually talking to I was working with a group actually this morning, and they have a bunch of, this organization has a lot of up and coming young leaders in it, and one of the things, the person leading it, the executive said this. He was like, "They're going to be closed door meetings that we're going to have that you're not going to be in there." And in that moment, and they're hiring me to consult them, whatever. I didn't say it, but what you just said reminded me of this. I was like, I thought about this. I was in that room. I'm like, I think so many times, I think a danger that leaders who are older have is that they either work for leaders and people who just crushed them and kept them down, never gave them access to anything, right? So now when we get into those roles, we say, oh, I'm never doing that. But the problem with that is that we expose people, we expose people to leadership things that they don't need, not because they aren't worthy of the information, they don't know what to do with it, and it's way more harmful because you get in worlds, because I'm like you, I got in worlds early on. My entire life has me being in worlds that I should not have been in before. Now the great thing is that in his unbelievable sovereignty, God used those things in this brokenness to change or transform with therapy, all that. But I was always in worlds hearing stuff, and on top of it, having to process that stuff on my own. So having to process so early, as let's say in my Christian faith, I'm early in my Christian faith, and I'm like seeing people I'm hearing preach some things. I'm in a green room with them, and I'm like, hold on. I'm like,
Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, I'm like, dog, hold up. Y'all were just saying this. And so I'm out here. Y'all got me throwing away all my Mobb Deep CDs. And then these jokers, I get in the car with them, but they listening to, Van Halen. And I'm like, hold on, what? And again, that type of stuff, or them being in there and, talking about giving. And then I get back there and I'm like, man, the way they talked about money and stuff like all the bad stuff that people would say in terms of the church, I saw all of it. It's the grace of God, because I realized, because when I started, it was God. I mean, it was his spirit, his intuition, whatever you want to call it, that allowed me to look at a situation like, that's wrong. Doesn't mean the principle. What they're saying is right. How they actually do it does not line up. And so I could separate that. But again, I think so many times, I'm going to say this for people who are leading, whether it's for your children or just leaders in general, you have a responsibility to look at those you lead and say, what information can they handle? Because they may not emotionally be able to process it. They may not, and it's not about them going and telling anybody. It's just they're going to go home and they're going to create their own thing without knowing all the context, all the nuance, all the whatever it is, all the history. Because sometimes we know this, all of us lead, is that sometimes most of life is gray. I always tell people, God gave 10 commandments. He gave 10 million. Like, it's a lot of life is gray. And you're like, oh, well, why did you let this happen? And you didn't deal with this right away. And then they do this. But then I'm like, dude, have you ever read any leadership book? But take that out. Read the Bible. There were so many moments like, oh, they let God bless that person. And, you look at, I'm reading Genesis, Abraham, and you look at Isaac, all that stuff that went on, because there was something far greater that was trying to be accomplished that we didn't know. But if you just look at that situation, like, oh, he should have dealt with him just like he dealt with this person, just like he dealt with that person. And I think so many times those who are younger, I want to encourage you, if you listen to this, never be in a rush to get information. Listen, don't be in a rush to get information. Listen, I'm telling you right now, the older I get, the more ignorant I want to be to information. I'm like, don't tell me.
Because you're responsible for whatever you hear.
Yes, what I'm saying. Somebody come to me, I'm like, big dog. They're like, hey, man, this is happening. I'm like, nope.
Don't tell me.
Don't tell me. Nope. So, Bri, let me ask you this question, because again, especially being from a younger generation, like, how do you handle? Because again, with the world that you're in, working with me, like, you do have access to someone younger, a lot of information. How do you deal with that?
I was thinking about, as you were telling the story of the client that you're with this morning, because I have such vivid memories of being maybe like 19, first coming around. And when all of the teams in the room together and there's like the 3 people who exit and go to a different room, and you can emotionally feel like the tangible difference of a shift in conversation that's about to happen in the next room. I remember experiencing so many different moments like that. And I have such vivid memories of thinking, like, my prayers were, I pray to God I never have to be in that room. And it's not a necessarily noble thought either. I mean, Paul and I were actually talking about earlier about, for me, I have like this a little bit of a reluctant hero kind of thing, where it's like, more than anything, I would prefer to not have to carry the weight of making those kinds of decisions. And lean more on the side of if I would rather personally deal with the insanity that comes from being like strapped up, like not talking, just staying completely like into yourself, than maybe the embarrassment of making the wrong choice or saying the wrong thing, especially because of the world that we live in right now. And so I will say too, I think there's another side of young leaders, that the reason why there's an abdication of responsibility and no desire to enter the rooms is because it's like, I want people to do it better, and I critique those who I don't think do it at the level they should, but I don't know that I can do that because I don't really understand how. What I will say to you though, and one of the reasons why I feel like I've kind of pushed forward with the responsibility of being in the conversations or making those kind of decisions, is because I have the luxury of growing up in a culture where, as we're making really tough calls, my self-agency and my sense of self is simultaneously being developed. Like, my conscience isn't like bound to the culture of who we are or what it is that we do. It's genuinely every decision that we make and every conversation we have that I'm brought in and able to be a part of. It's like, this is my call. Like, nobody is forcing me to be here. There's no, psychological safety, that conversation. I genuinely don't feel that here. And so that's something that I think about a lot too, where if I weren't to be in an environment like that, I too would also be someone who was like, yeah, I don't want to, because I don't know how. I don't know if I'm going to be able to deal with the repercussions or the shame of making the wrong call, especially when it has to do with somebody's future or their view of God in the church space, if I don't agree with what my choice is now in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to ask this question, is that right now, when you look at the state of leadership in the world, and it can be any space, right? It can be in business, be politically, it can be church, whatever. What's one of the biggest issues? If you had to say, man, if I could fix one issue right now in, different leadership, what would that one issue look like? What would you do to fix it? Or what would it be that you would fix, so to say?
I have maybe a hot take. This is my true thought. I think singular leadership is aging out. I think singular figurehead leadership is aging out. That doesn't mean that you don't have visionaries and people at the forefront who can guide ships and like point us in a direction. But I think, and maybe I'm not saying it perfectly, but my point is, I think that singular leadership, especially for large ideas, large movements, large institutions, without really fortified, really grounded, really optimized systems in place, really thoughtful teams in place, is not sustainable. And so I think that we are moving toward a culture. I come from an organization. When I first moved to New York, I was working with this dance company, and a big core value for us was shared leadership. They went from a singular founder leadership now to a co-director leadership. So now the lead team is a co-leadership team. And I just see such a drastic difference when there is the singular entity and a more plural leadership model. And I'm not saying that that's the answer. Like every institution, every organization, every church body can't have that. Right. But I think that there is something to be said about moving away from a kind of individualistic, the one genius, the one leader, the one founder, the one in any instance, and moving to something that's a little bit more collective, team, something. I think that motto is really dangerous. And we're seeing it in politics. We're seeing it in large, institutions, where it's starting to crumble a little bit.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think akin to that, one issue I think we should address and change is personal overestimation. Like thinking of, on a biblical lens, thinking of ourselves more highly than we ought to. And I think a big part of when we're talking about burnout is we overestimate who we are, who we can be, but not just in what we do, but in our gift, in our understanding of ourselves, in our personalities. I've found that it's very easy to start to mimic people that are successful rather than just simply saying they do it one way, I do it a different way. And I think specifically in the pastorate, one of the great challenges is as soon as you get on a stage, there's a large amount of kind of unchecked power that you get from the platform. And even with the best systems and culture, there's that power and you feel it and it feels different. And that level of authority can lead you to overestimate how important and central you are. That, hey, just because I am the most visible person in the room doesn't mean I'm necessarily the most important person in the room. It just means I'm the most responsible person in the room, or I should be. And so I think like there's a level of overestimation that we naturally feel. And I think there has been a pendulum swing. So now we've devalued everybody with titles. So it's like your titles don't matter and stuff. And so that can be an unhealthy pendulum swing. But I still think there are vestiges of the church, and you see it, especially when people get popular or go viral. Now people who don't even know them, have never met them, start defending them. And I'm like, why are we overestimating? That feeds into bad part of us. That like, let's not do that. Yeah. Let's say I appreciate and enjoy them, and I've learned a lot, but I don't have to, go 10 toes down in every comment section, because actually that's going to lead to something unhealthy for them. And I think being more honest about our own weaknesses and humble about who we are and who we're not, I think would be something that would help. And I'm speaking specifically in the church context. I think would help the church a lot and help us not feel the pressure to be heroes and the one.
I think you're both. And I think I wouldn't go as far as to say like if it's shared leadership, because I do believe in it's more this. I think that, and what you're really trying to get to is the fact that both of your points kind of combined together is how I think it should be. It's the idea of having a genuine understanding of self, because then what that does is once you do that, you don't overestimate, then you're willing to give power away, which then goes to shared leadership. I think what the problem will become, shared leadership will end up being the thing that people will use power to now then, oh, well, you don't have this, and then it becomes fragmented organizations, because those two people who are leading, all of a sudden, they're going to have a power trip, and then next thing you know, it goes from this group, unless they're a great relationship, whatever, and then all of a sudden, here's a new studio, here's a new dance studio starting, here's a new thing, here's a new company starting, right?
Greater Mount Zion.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church, right? All that stuff happens because it's the idea that people don't have an understanding. And going to what you were saying, biblically, one of the things I would start thinking about this is because I talk a ton about authenticity, and even on this podcast, and people have asked me sometimes, like they'll, push at me like, well, authenticity, biblically, because at times I live in all these worlds. And I try to tell people, I'm like, everything I do in my life, I only see it through one lens. I see it through the lens of the Bible. I just know how to say it, and I know how to say it in real life versus always that. But when you look at what you're saying, it ultimately comes out of this, it's Romans 12. It's when Paul, when Apostle Paul says this idea of, he was like, the idea of offer your bodies as living sacrifice. Then he goes on to say, so you can attest what God's good, pleasing, and perfect will is for your life. So he says, for you to understand who you are, you have to die. You won't understand yourself because who you are, because I love how Thomas Merton says it. Thomas Merton says this. He says that to be born human is to be born false. Because if you actually believe the Bible to be true, that sin actually is in everyone, we are born of our mother's womb false. So that's why Paul says you have to die, because that false self has to die to then come up to then his next verse, he says in verse 4, is that you see each other, you see yourself with sober judgment. In sober judgment, you think about this. When people are drunk, two ways you go. You overestimate or you underestimate, right? When people are drunk, they out there trying to jump off cars. Can't jump over a piece of paper, but they don't try to flip, right? The other people, they're sad drunk. I ain't good enough. I'm the worst. So what people end up doing, they don't have proper view either way of themselves. They overestimate or they underestimate themselves. And so they're of no use. And that's where I feel like the key in today's world is really authentic leadership. And what that is, people genuinely know, I know who I am. I've got the toughness, the resilience to remain that. And then with that, I give this power away, because that's where now in the things I lead, I'm always trying to say, okay, can people take this and can they run with it? And not only in title, but actual real authority. Can they do it? So, for example, I'm saying, real authority, because in our, our church space right now, I can't tell, I can't say that, hey, all right, well, I'm the founding pastor, blah, 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 and I'm giving our elders all this stuff. No, legally, on paper, I can't even be the head elder. Why? Because I did it on purpose. I'm like, no, I've got to get authority away. When somebody takes over, when she runs this stuff, I can't say, oh, well, Bri and I, we partner, we're building this company. You know what I had to do? I had to give her equity into it, because now it's power. Because now, oh no, she legally has power now with that. And so I think that's where we have to, for leaders out there, when you're empowering people, man, that's how you begin to build that type of culture we need, is the idea of people are aware, and then you begin to give that away. And now some people are cool. Oh, this is what I do really well. I don't do that well. All right, well, man, they got to take that and run with it. And I think that's how you build healthy organizations. But power was never meant to be static. It was always meant to be given away. You think about Genesis 2, and again, I know a lot today talking about the Bible, but Genesis 2 is what? It's Adam and Eve. It's Adam. God does what? He breathes life into Adam. He literally takes his very life-giving breath, puts in Adam to do what? To then go and make something of the world. Power was never meant to be static, and that is the problem in our country today, is that we have the oldest Congress, the oldest thing, is because it's the age-old thing. Power stays static, and you don't give it away, and what it does, when it stays there, it corrupts and it kills. And then there has to be something, then there has to be protests and revolution to break it. And I see it even happen all the time in our space, in the faith space. It's always that. It's the idea. That's why COVID was a game changer, because all of a sudden we all realized as pastors, oh yeah, we're not that important. Because the show kept going. You know what I'm saying? Churches kept growing, but everybody got a camera. You thought it was about you showing up. Everybody nah, you know what, man? No, we're not that important. But they kept going. I think it was God being very kind to shake the snow globe, to say, no, power is in the hands. It's always been meant to be in the hands of our people so they can run with it.
I have 2 questions. First, I'm going to jump back to something that you said. Specifically in the church, there can sometimes be such a very interesting, I guess maybe term, relationship between the primary communicator and those, let's say, the congregation or those who are primarily consuming. It reminds me sometimes, like, the scene in Toy Story with the minions where it's like the chosen one, like, the whole man of God situation that can almost create this like odd sense of intimacy or like parasocial type relationship because of the level of things that you vulnerably share in a message. A whole number of people know a lot of information about you that seems like a lot that maybe you don't have the same relationship with back. How do you navigate both being authentic and honest in your communication and not being the person who goes back into the green room and then is going through all these different things and just communicated something different without with using wisdom and not over exposing yourself or overly going to an extreme of self-disclosure?
Yeah, I think especially in the pulpit, that's a phenomenal question, by the way. I think especially in the pulpit, one of my mentors taught me the difference between being transparent and translucent, and how there was a lot of like this transparency from everybody wants realness and authenticity, and so you'd actually end up oversharing. And a lot of that is a function of us not dealing with our shadow.
That's great. Yeah.
So when we have space and room to speak freely, what is within us comes out of us. And without that restraint, we tend to overshare because we don't have a space to actually process those things. So we actually turn, and it's actually a dark, emotional, very unwise emotional move, is we turn our people and our congregation as spaces to receive the emotions we haven't processed. So we just kind of, vomit up these unfiltered emotions. But I think, we talked about the difference of being transparent is where people see everything, right? And it's true, like in the heart of it, we desire for people to see who we truly are, our hearts, that we're caring, that we're credible. But also there's probably wisdom in being translucent, which is I can see you, but I can't see all of you. Right? Like I can see you, I can see the outline of who you are, but I can't see like the fullness of who you are. And I think for us, it's been really crucial to actually have those spaces where there's relationship, but also to recognize that if I overshare, you start to think that my story is canon, right? You start to think that it's the 67th book, right? It's very dangerous. And so I think we've tried as best as possible to kind of be more translucent with people and to make applications where necessary, but to not overshare everything. Like you shouldn't know everything that my wife and I are talking to, right? Like, like sure, you're in our home, but it's different. Like you're not in our room, like there has to be boundaries and levels and limits. And I think that's the difference in our quest of being real and authentic. We start to kind of overinflate our own experience. And I think it's good as pastors and leaders, especially from stages and platforms, kind of disengage people from us and to kind of let them see. This is why I think multiple communicators are so important. I'm realizing now as a leader to disengage from us, disengage from our story being the main story of this church, and to say, and there's so many different ways this can be played out in life. And if it connects, great. But I think sometimes, and this kind of gets, I don't mean to get on this rabbit trail, but sometimes we overshare our personal stories because we want to be seen as something. We want to use the preaching moment or the teaching moment to be seen as something by other people. And now it ceases to be about the communication of truth that can transform. And it starts to be the communication of me. And there's a thin line and all that, but I think we've tried to be translucent rather than like transparent.
My second question was along the lines of power, especially because we're going into the Black Leadership Summit. Shout out, check it out. Look up the website. Come next year. I would love for each of you to answer this. When we talk about the concept of power and empowerment and giving power away, one of the things that I feel like you've been so honest about and especially in leading and being a part of multi-ethnic environments, is that you want to be somebody who gives power away to many different people, and the criticism that you receive for that. And so I would just love to hear more, like, what is that emotional experience like to feel what it's like for power to be hoarded over you in a way that's harmful, and then to actively try to give it away to someone who doesn't necessarily look like you. And then add another layer to it, you get criticized for doing that as well because of the expectation that it's kept within a certain group too.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I would say because I've seen enough life and I've observed life to know that if I don't do it, it becomes the poison that kills me. It kills the calling. It kills the impact. It kills credibility. Because, and here's the other thing too, it's to do this, it's why I believe it to be right is because of how difficult it is. And there's something supernatural that does that, which I believe is the Spirit of God. Because left to myself, no. You know what I mean? It's like I want to hoard it. I want to keep it. Because, see, people don't understand this, when you give power away, you become vulnerable. Because the people you give it to could use that same power to hurt you. And that's happened. And that's a hard thing. What really gets hard is when people who, speaking candidly, when you give power away to people who make me as a black man who are white, who then use that power against me, that it's now doubles it. It doubles now because you're like, oh, I actually and here's what I realized, and I'll never forget this. I feel like God said this. So is your expectation then, if you do what I ask you to do, that everything has to work the way you want it to work? Does it have to work the way you want it to work? Because if that's the case, I mean, you realize, like, man, no, it doesn't. Suffering and hardship happens. People are people. They're going to do it. And it's like you learn, you use greater wisdom. But in the end, you don't stop doing that, because what happens is that now my pain, the Bible is very clear, do not let a root of bitterness grow up in you. That's what happens. When you do that, bitterness grows up, you start, and it ends up polluting you. And I wish I was honest, say, oh man, every time I do it, oh man, I just love doing it. No, I just literally do it out of obedience. That's why I tell people sometimes I live in this like dichotomy of like, I care so much about feelings and emotions. And also, like, excuse me, like, I don't give a damn sometimes about feelings and emotions, because here's why. It's because it doesn't matter. It's about my obedience to something. I don't care how I feel. A lot of times, I don't feel like doing a lot of stuff I do, but it's just, I've just literally learned it just works in the end. And I just believe that my life isn't mine. And so because of that, I have to do that. And so it's a very difficult thing to do it. But I also know too, this is the only way. And in my crazy brain and in faith, could I be just one person of many who decide to say that, how do we reverse, everybody talks about you, especially you coming to the Pentecostal world, curses, right? Oh man, that's a curse, and we're gonna break this curse. And we think it's just through praying. I'm like, miss me. I believe in praying and breaking and binding and all that. But here's the point, though. But I also think the way you reverse a curse is the fact you have to begin to now actively sow opposite of that.
That's good.
Opposite of that. So if for me, if I'm like this, the curse is, man, people staying divided in our nation. So how do I do it? In the little bit of space I have, no. I'm going to sow what I want to see in the world. I'm going to sow this, even though people are going to take shots at me, even though it's going to look like, oh man, I'm just placating or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I want to sow in the world what I believe I'm supposed to. And when you do that, just maybe it turns into something that maybe it turns into a movement, or maybe it turns into one person seeing it, and that person who sees turns to it, or maybe they hear about it, or my grandkids or my great grandkids hear about it, and that turns into the thing. But all I know is this, is that what God's asked me to do is in faith is to sow that, and I'm going to do it. And you know what? Because again, I want to give people that opportunity. You know what I'm saying? I watched my father go through this. I watched my father, man, he was the only one of 10 black head coaches out of 300 someone. I watched what he went through, and I watched how that played out for him. And I still was stuck with, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to get bitter, get mad, get frustrated, or actually say, you know what, I want to see something different? And you know what? It's one of my, and one of the greatest things now is this. Some people who are in positions of power that like I have the ability to, without anybody knowing, I always used to want to be known. Now I don't, now I want to, like, I love living in the shadows. I talk to him about it all the time. I'm like, there's stuff that I have, like, nobody ever know that I was a part of doing it. And I actually am now starting to enjoy that, because here's the reason why, is because at the end of the day, I care about results. I care way more about results now than I do than the accolades that you get with it. I care about moving the needle. So
I'll talk about it in like a more like non-faith-based space, because I can go down that rabbit hole, but there's so much. But like, even as a professor or as a director, like I lead a team of musicians, and we're writing, we're creating together. My MO is, I think I'm the opposite. I'm always giving power away, and if anything, I opposite in that the work that I have to do is about retaining power, is about hold on to what's my due power. Like, that's actually my work, because for me, for whatever reason, how I'm wired, I'm always like, autonomy, like, oh no, that's yours, take that. And sometimes I'll even give away what is mine, and that's another set of issues, right? And God is working with me on that, like, no, that's actually your responsibility. That's actually your power. That's your place to hold. Because if you don't hold that, I was telling somebody I think we were doing an interview yesterday, and I was saying, my biggest growth edge this last year has been stepping out of the number 2 seat and moving into my rightful place in the spaces that I'm called to as a number 1. I'm an amazing number 2. I perfected being number 2. I love being a number 2. I know how to come alongside a visionary and amplify everything they're doing. I don't want to be the visionary. I know how to come beside a boss and just be like, okay, boom, what do you need me to do? Let's work with me. Let's get it. I'm so good at it. I love it so much. And God has graced me for it. But in this next season of life, God is calling me in certain ways and in certain spaces to step into that number 1 place. And that's about holding, same idea, holding power with grace, like being in power, but doing it in a way where you're still ultimately surrendered to God and in every space that I occupy. So that's been the work for me is I'll get pushback from my team, like, because I'll be like, okay, let's make a decision together. And they're like, why don't you just make the decision? And so we'll spend an extra 30 minutes on something where I could have just cut through and made the decision, right? And so I think for me, again, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the work is about owning my power, owning my position, and doing that in a way that really does push the room forward and doesn't put too much power in the hands of those who are around me in a way that is actually, it doesn't serve anyone. That's been my work.
Wow. Yeah, that's so good. I think I'm unlearning over functioning, and as someone who's unlearning over functioning, I don't just mean in the work that I do, but also in the emotions that I carry for the people that I lead. And so I'm trying as best as possible to stop trying to play the Spirit of God for them in whatever area, if it's non-church organization, in the church. And I almost take this sense, I think it's because of the model of leadership I saw in my father, of I don't want you to make a mistake, or I don't want you to, I don't want to give something to you that's going to crush you. And I had to get over, I think I'm trying to get over this guilt that I feel that if someone takes it and it's not perfect or it's not 75%, we obviously know that in delegation it's not going to be 100% of what you desire it to be, but more so in my context, it's been the fear that people would be cosmically responsible in a right and wrong moral ethical sense for the things that I place in their hand that I maybe should not have, or waited or held on to, or equipped them and trained them better for. And so I've tried to, as best as possible, confront some of the fears that I have, which aren't necessarily, oh no, I'm not going to be the guy anymore. It's more like, how do I manage the disappointment that I would feel if they're disappointed? Like, how would I manage the disappointment that I feel if it doesn't measure up to their expectations? And I think a big part of that in leadership is knowing what's your emotional work and what's not. You know, I gotta let that go. You know, I gotta strategically step away from that and say, if I spend hours, I will never sleep. I'll never sleep well. I'll never get rest. And even the things that I think might be failures are not irreparable as much as I believe that they are. And just the script in my heart that I'm trying to rewrite and counter. And I've seen what it's felt like when a leader, when we hoard power, people feel unseen. And I've seen what it's looked like and felt like when I've had so much in me, but I didn't know where to take it, where to go, and how it almost felt like being overlooked. And so now on the other end of it, I say, okay, how do I see people properly, but also not crush them with what I see, not prematurely tell them everything that I see, not prematurely call out what they're not ready for, right? Not get to level, 401 when they're on 101, right? And so I think the duality of those emotions has kind of led to this kind of interesting space of, okay, I need to step back emotionally, but I also need to say, what does it look like for me as a leader to remember how it felt not to be seen and valued with what I could actually bring, and highlight what is necessary in others?
No, that's great. Well, I feel like I could sit here and talk all night, because again, I think that, especially for you two, again, one thing I appreciate about both of you is that the humility, the level of leadership that you carry, and your talent and your ability. That's one thing I've always been impressed for both of you, has been like, when I've worked with you, is that immensely talented, but literally the humility to be like, man, what can I do? I talked to you, I was like, hey, would you, black leadership, something, you come speak. He's like, yeah, and literally your thing to me is like any place you ask me to be, I'm going to be. And I was like, say, you know what I mean? It was like, I'm like, God, wow, okay. And then
within reason.
Yeah, within reason, I know, right? Like, hey, here we go. We're going to go rob a bank. Come on, let's go now. Or, with, like I said, me and you, what I'm saying, been in this thing for a while together, and just the fact of where, it was whenever I pick up the phone, hey, I need you. Then he's like, man, say less, I'm there. And the humility of what that takes as we've gone through, and especially with you seeing that as well. So I think that, this conversation, and what I hope people get from it more than anything else, is this idea of like, not just hearing these stories, but then take it, as we talked about today, and actually process it yourself. What did you hear? I always tell people, when you hear something good, just don't only write down what you hear that's good. Write down why it's good. Why it's good for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, why that thing is good for you. Because a lot of times we'll just write, oh, it's a good quote. But why was it a good quote? Because it did something internally. And what we'll do is get the good quote, but we'll never do the work of why it was a good quote. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, things that you heard that was good, but why? Why is it applicable to your life? Why did it hit you in a certain way? Because I believe that when you don't do those things, you don't learn to listen to actually understand. Because a lot of times we have a lot more in us that we're actually just speaking to us. And I think the more you learn, the more wisdom actually comes forth. And that is one of the greatest resources needed in the world today, is wisdom. Wisdom will be the thing of the future. It will be. I think the two things will be authenticity and wisdom will be the two greatest, the two greatest coins in the realm will be those two. It'll be authenticity and wisdom. And I think you get wisdom by actually processing that. So, well, guys, I hope today was helpful. Until next time, keep writing the rules.